This video is going to show you how to draft a really basic bodice pattern or sloper pattern for an avatar in CLO-3D. This is an example of what we're going to end up with when we're finished doing all the work. If you would like to download the file that I have open right now, you can go to the links below and download a practice file. But for the purpose of the tutorial, I'm going to start with an empty workspace. So I'm going to use the avatars that we have in our default library. I'm going to go to the avatar folder and go to female v2. I will choose Fifi. And then I will go into the size file and pull in one of the ASTM sizes. I'm going to pull in the curvy 14. Next, you can zero in on the silhouette in your 2D window. And I'm going to need a couple measurements to start drafting. You can get these measurements by going to the avatar display menu and turning on show avatar measurements. This will show you all the areas that are already marked out on the avatar. And to actually see what they measure, you can expand your 3D toolbar and find this set of tools: edit measurement, basic circumference measurement, and basic tape measure. The edit version, edit measurement, will let you left click on that line and see what the measurement is. I'm going to start by measuring the widest area of my body, which is the bust. So that's 40.37 inches. And then I'm going to make my own marking for length that I'm going to follow. The basic tape measure tool will let you draw straight lines. So I can go here to my shoulder, click once, and then when I get to a location where I'd like to finish, double click to end. I can click once to start, and if you hold shift as you're moving, it will give you a grid to move along. I'm left clicking as I move to anchor some points of my line so it doesn't wobble around. If you don't anchor it, it can deviate off the gridded area. You can see that kind of happened there. So I'm going to keep left clicking. And then when I get to a point where I want to end, double click in that location. So I'm just doing this to get a general starting length for my body. My chest measured 40.3. I'll call it 40.5. And then the length I have is around 26. So I have 40.3 inches for my chest circumference. I'm going to add 2 inches of ease, and I'm going to round up so I can work with slightly more even measurements. So at 40.37, I'm going to make it 40.5. I'm going to add 2 inches of ease, so then that's going to be 42.5. But I'm going to work on a quarter size for development. So I'm going to take that 42.5 and then divide that in 4. So for me, that's 10 5/8. And to just work with even numbers for myself, I'm going to round that up to 10 3/4. So first I'm going to grab the rectangle tool, and I want to left click once to get the create rectangle box up so I can make a rectangle that's 10.75 by, I'm going to go with 25 inches high. That's coming from this length that I marked out. I'm going to just go a tiny bit shorter and hit OK to place that rectangle down. Okay, then I'll take this and just shimmy it down here. So I am working in front of my avatar. We can hit reset 2D arrangement so our 3D window matches. And now we're going to use these editing tools to generate a body. As you're working this top level, you can think of this as high point shoulders, and we're gonna generate a lot of markings off of this level because that's how a lot of specs are measured. So the first thing we're going to do is mark our shoulder slope. I have the edit pattern tool. You can right click on the very top edge and choose offset as internal line. I'm going to do a distance of 1.25 for my shoulder slope. Click OK to place that down. Then you can go back immediately to this top edge, right click again, and choose offset as internal line again. This time we're going to mark the armhole drop. for the distance, I'm going to type in 4.5, but change my number of offsets to 2. So that will give me a half marking and the full armhole drop of 8 inches that I am going to start with. Can hit OK to place that down. Next, I'm going to mark my neck width and my front neck drop. So get the Add Point Split Line tool, hover at the top edge, and right click at some point. This is going to be this area that's towards the center of the avatar is going to be the center front. So for the neck width, I'm going to work on the half. I'm going to choose 3 inches, and that'll be a 6-inch neck width once it's opened up. Next, I'm going to mark my front neck drop, so I will hover over here now, right click as well, and I'll choose a front neck drop of 3.5 and hit OK. Now we're going to mark the across shoulder. This line that's marking our shoulder slope, hover, right click, and in this width area, we're going to do an across shoulder total of 16. So I'll type in 8 here. I'll show you where I got that measurement in 1 second. You can hit OK to put that down. So I can see in the 3D window that I am still on my edit measurement tool. I can spin around to the back and click on this. This is where I'm getting the across shoulder from. All right, now Add Point Split Line tool, we're going to mark the across front placement. Now you can hover and right click, and here I'm going to type in 7 inches. So I'll do 8 inches for the across shoulder. I'm going to do 7 inches for the across front, and then 7.5 for the across back. So after I place that point down, I immediately right click on the right side of it and place that new point a 1/2 inch away from there. That'll give me the total of 7.5. Next thing I like to do is give myself a little squared off marking right here. So using internal polygon, I'm going to draw a straight line from here to that lowest marking. And then now with the same internal polygon tool, I'm going to start where I marked my front neck drop, click there, then click at high point shoulder, click at the across shoulder marking, and then bring this down to the lowest marked line, double click to end. Then I'm going to switch to the edit curve point tool and scoop out my front neck line and my armhole. You can usually get a really decent shape with only 1 or 2 curve points, maybe 3. I'll go in here with a little bit extra. Make sure that's squared off. Same thing here. I can put one very, very close to the front neckline and make sure it's squared off. And then I'll only need a couple in between here. This will all be really easy to adjust once it's on the avatar anyway. So now I need internal polygon, and I'm going to draw a line here and here for my back neck and my back armhole. Also then go back to the edit curve point after you've drawn them and shape this out as well. Okay, that's really all I need. Now I'm going to use this to generate my front and back body pieces. And there are a couple ways that you can really get these shapes out. One way that I've seen people use is by copying and pasting this piece, so you have 2 of these, and then using cut to go around and slice all these excess pieces off. The way that I'm going to use is with the trace tool. So with trace, I'm going to move around this pattern and select all of the segments that would make up my potential front. Make sure every edge is selected so you have a fully closed shape and that all of the corners are fully intersecting and everything is fully closed. Once that's all selected, you can right click on any of those selected segments and choose Trace as Pattern. That's going to pull out a front panel. Then I'll go back in with the same tool and select all of the areas that make up my back panel and trace that as a pattern. Now I'm going to take my patterns and shift them around my 2D window. The back piece, I am going to flip this horizontally. Both of these pieces are going to be my wearer's left side of the garment. And to quickly clean up these lines, I will use the lock all pattern outlines, selection, and then unlock. And really the draft, I'm going to delete this. You can keep this if you want to. If you want to keep it, take it and put it somewhere over here. And then go into your 3D window and hit Reset 2D Arrangement. I'm going to go to my selection tool. You can deactivate this draft if you want to keep it but not really deal with it. Make sure you deactivate it after you've reset this. If you deactivate it first, this piece won't be affected. And then I can turn Show Avatar Measurements off and turn Show Arrangement Points on. Before I arrange my pieces, I am immediately going to make my symmetrically linked copy and place that down. So then I can select all of them, just kind of push them out of the way. They're blocking the arrangement points. And then place the front panel here and the back panels here. It's okay if the pieces kind of poke into the body like that a little bit. Her bounding volumes are a little bit small. And I'm done with the arrangement points, so I will turn them off. And now I can sew this together. I can sew in the 3D window or the 2D window. Sew your center front closed and your center back closed. Oh, this little point, there's a leftover point. You can delete this. And then I already put my sewing down, so I'm just going to adjust it so it completely hits the back neckline. And then I am safe to simulate. I'll hit spacebar. I'm going to get off my sewing tool and go to Transform Pattern. And I'm going to pull in one of the muslin fabrics that we have. So I'm going to use the first muslin that's available. I will take this and drag it and drop it over what is currently being used. Then I can close my library. Okay, so I want to build a bust dart into this bodice, and then after that I'm going to build a sleeve. So now I'm going to show you a few edits that you can do to true up and clean up your body. One of the first ones I'm going to do is select these shoulder seams. I'm going to select the back first and then the front because the back is going to move to meet the front when I use this action called match up. So for match up, both of the shoulders measure the exact same thing, so it doesn't really matter what you choose. Then it will move the pattern that you selected first to match up with the pattern you selected second. And then you can adjust any segments accordingly with these corners matched together. A really easy way to rotate this piece back upright is actually to use the matchup function again. This will only work here because I actually have a completely vertical line that I can reference. So either the side seam or the center front of your body, select the side seam here and then choose one of these vertical segments and then choose matchup to end, and this will snap back to place. Another thing I'll show you briefly is how an option called retract works. If I want to open this neckline a little bit, you can select one of the front and back segments, right click and choose offset pattern outline. If you choose retract, I'm going to type in a larger measurement so you can see what it does. It will basically retract this section of the pattern following whatever shape our pattern outline has. So it'll kind of radiate inwards as it moves. 1 inch is not the distance I'm going to adjust. I'm just going to take off a quarter all around and hit OK, and it'll open that up. Great. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a bust dart into this bodice. There are a couple pattern editing tricks that I'm going to show you how to shift your dart around. So I'm going to show you how you can pinch out certain areas before you do pattern edits to kind of figure out how much you actually need to take out of your pattern. This is using the tool called Tack. Tack allows you to tack fabric to other fabric. You can think of it almost like a tailor tack as well, because you can lengthen this and it will have some give or some buoyancy if you're just kind of loosely securing two areas together. But in this case, I'm going to left click here and move around so you can see your tack moving with your cursor along the surface of the fabric. And then left click to finish that tack, dictating the area that you would like to pinch out and close. And you're going to see the initial length of that tack. As soon as I simulate, the tack is going to pinch together. If you think you've pinched too much or you would like to see this on the other side of your pattern, here are the options you can do. With the Edit Tack tool, you can move this around in both the 3D or the 2D window. This is going to show you the length of the distance before you tacked it, but it's kind of tacked to 0 here. If you select the tack in the property editor, you'll have thread length as an option. I'm not going to change it, but it's just so you can see this is where you would make the tack longer. Once I have that in a place that I'm happy with, I will right click on the tack and choose duplicate to symmetric pattern. Because these patterns are symmetrically linked, it will generate a tack directly on the other side. And then I can simulate and see how I feel about how much I'm pinching out. So I'm going to start with about a 1 3/4 inch measurement. I might bump it up to 2 inches after, but now that I'm done with these tacks, I'm going to delete them. I don't need them. I want to get my shape relaxed again. So I'm going to click on this area in my 3D window and get a general idea that this is where the dart is going to radiate from. I am about to show a version of putting in a dart or shifting a dart, which has tools that are only available in version 5.2 or after. In the following clip directly after that, I'm going to re-show putting in a dart, but with options that are available in 5.1 or below. If you want to just jump to one version or the other, you can check below in the detail for those timestamps. Okay, so locate about where you want your dart to be, and then get the Add Point Split Line tool and basically left click and put a point about where that is. If you want to keep this in even measurements, so I can see when I hover here, I'm at 4.102. So I'm going to hover right click and place this exactly 4 inches along my armhole. Next, I am going to put a 2-inch marking down from my armhole drop point. Before I get my dart into the armhole area, I'm basically going to take a chunk out of the side seam area to shift the fullness down. After I have the point on the side seam, with the Edit Pattern tool, you can right click on that point and choose Add Dart. I am going to make my total width 2 inches and my length 5 inches. I'm actually going to go with 6 inches and hit OK. I'm going to be a little bit generous with the size. So what's going to happen is Your side seam lengths are now not going to match, but don't worry, we'll fix that after. If you are in 5.2, you can use the Edit Pattern tool. Select both of the legs that make up the dart, right click on one of them, and you'll find Rotate Dart. Then you have to left click somewhere else on the pattern to move the dart into that location. So I want the dart to be over here at the armhole area. I'm going to left click. I'll have this guideline, and then it will basically be restricting me to not be able to move beyond the old dart. Then I can left click at either the point or anywhere along this segment you see my cursor sliding along. I'm going to choose the point location. Then it's going to say select side to rotate. So I'm going to want to rotate this little piece downward. I'll click on that. And then this piece will pivot downward, stopping once the dart closes. Then you can left click and put that down. Then you'll still have to choose the finished length of the dart. Here you could right click at any point, or I can simply manually slide along this until I hit my old dart tip point and left click to place that down. Then the dart is going to move into the armhole, and I can simulate. So what it did was it did shorten my side seam. Then I can switch back to Edit Pattern, start moving my point, and then I'm going to hold the D key down and shift. Those are going to give me some guidelines. And then I can release once that area is straightened out. So this little point is left over. I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to even out the side seam length. So here I am at 14.2. Here I'm at 16. I'm going to grab my front length, start moving, and right click and add 1.8. That's going to give me this 16.064. That's fine. So I just put it down. I'm over 0.064. I'm going to hold shift, move back, right click, and then move this back 0.064. Okay, a little move down, little move back up. So now I'm at 16 here and 16 here. Then I can grab segment sewing and close my side seams again and simulate. And even after the dart is closed, you can select that dart, right click, and choose Edit Dart. And then I can increase the width of this. I'll make my total width 2.375. Every time I make this edit, I seem to get this error message that tells me the program has removed symmetry, and I can tell because these two pieces are no longer blue, which lets me know they're no longer linked to each other. If this happens, I can quickly select them afterwards, right click, and choose Apply Linked Editing. I'm choosing Symmetric Pattern with Sewing under the Apply Linked Editing category. It's going to relink them, and then I can continue editing. Now I'm going to show you a different version for shifting your dart. If you are in a version of CLO that is 5.1 or lower, the right click option for rotate dart will not be available. We have a slightly different method that we would use, instead incorporating the slash and spread tool to get this same type of dart shifting. Both methods begin with cutting a dart out of your side seam first. So when I pick back up for this version, I have backtracked to the point where I have just taken the dart out of the side seam. And now I'm going to show you option 2 for shifting your dart. I'm going to use the slash and spread tool. You can draw a line here as well and use the same tool, but I'm going to click on my dart point area and then my armhole, then click on this section and swing this downward. To put this down or release it, you have to make sure that you have no overlapping occurring on your pattern. So if you see this point either directly on top of that line or crossing over, when you left click, you're going to get this error that says pattern outlines and holes are intersecting. So just be really careful. Give yourself a tiny little bit of space. I can tell right there that they are very, very close but not overlapping, so I can left click and put it down. Okay. So it doesn't cut this out, it leaves some baselines in its place. Before we cut this out, I need to go to the edit pattern tool and get rid of this tiny little slice into the pattern. You can do that really easily by clicking over here. This is the end of that point, and simply deleting it. When you delete it, this is going to close up. And then I can take a minute and straighten out my side seam. Before I do this, I'm going to see what my curve points look like. I have some curve points here, so I will delete this one. I don't need that. And then get the edit pattern tool, and I'll hold the D key down as I shift it back, and it won't let any of the curve points move. If you don't hold the D key, they will move around. And then I can hold shift so it moves horizontally, hold D down simultaneously, and get that all aligned. So this is going to take a minute to just clean up and get an actual dart in here and get the armhole nice. I've lost some length at my side seam. Here I have 16, and now here I have 3 inches less. I am going to select only the front bottom hem, start moving right click, and add 3 inches. So now the dart needs to be cut open. Using the trace tool, I can hold shift and select these 2 markings, right click, and choose cut. All of my stuff has come unsewn. I'll go in there with the segment tool or the free sewing tool and sew that all shut. Okay, now that I have this dart here, one of the things you really want to look for is that you don't have really big drag lines at your side seam. If you do, you probably want to start with taking a larger amount then out of that initial bite. I probably could have removed an additional 1/2 inch or so, and this would sit a little bit better, but I can now do the following. I don't need this line here. I'm going to use the trace tool to delete it. This as well. There's a little baseline left over there. And I'm going to start just manipulating my dart. The first thing I'm going to do is move the apex point around a little bit. There's a transparent view, so you can switch to transparent view, and while you're moving your dart, see how close you're getting to your apex area. And then I'm going to start slowly widening this dart up. So from here, I'm going to select this point and start moving, but I don't want the armhole area to move, so I'm going to hit D. And when you see stuff like this happening, it's because there's a curve point there. So I'm going to let go and hit Edit Undo to undo any minor change that I made. Go in with my Edit Curve Point tool and delete these extra points that are right here. Then I can go back with the Edit Pattern tool, move them, hold D, and I'll have more space to move. I don't need to go past that little curvature area right there, so I can move, right click, and take off 0.25. I'll take off a 1/4 inch from there, and I'm going to do the same thing from this side. Start moving, hold D down, take off 0.25, and I'll do a little bit at a time until I feel like enough of the excess has been pinched out. I'm going to go a tiny bit more, grabbing my point, holding D and Controller Shift depending on my movement, right clicking and typing in 0.25. I'm going to put back one of those little quarters. So I'm happy with what I see here. Now I want to just like true up my armhole a little bit more. So if you want to move this dart out, I would recommend moving these one at a time. So here I can hold Control, start moving, right click, and extend this out 0.375. Maybe I'll go a little bit more. I'm going to do a whole 1/2 inch. And do the same thing over here. So the dart shape stays exactly the same, and it's just continuing outward. You should know how to reshape your armhole by just using regular curve points and moving them around, but I'm going to show you a different option for reshaping your armhole using the 3D pen garment tool. When you select it, you can hide the avatar if you like while you're doing this. If her arm is in the way, you can lift them up with joints. I'm not going to explain that here, but I'm okay to go in with the 3D pen tool and visually draw out the adjustment that I would like to have happen on my garment. You click to start and hold Control as you're clicking to move to generate curve points. When you draw this marking, it's not initially an internal line or any type of line you can touch in your 3D window. It's its own type of line called a 3D pen. But if you switch to the Edit 3D pen, you can right click here and choose Convert or Trace to Internal Shape. I'm going to choose Convert because Convert immediately deletes the pen mark but transfers it to be an internal line on my pattern. If you choose the trace option, it just leaves the pen mark behind. That's the only difference. But now I can use replace as pattern outline to swap that new edge. And on the back, I'm going to show you a different little tip with this tool. So I'm going to go and draw on my garment on the back armhole area in the 3D window. And then I'm going to go through the same action to convert it to an internal shape. I want to clean this little transition up here. So if you try and use the option for replace as pattern outline, when the internal line kind of just intersects the pattern edge, but it doesn't meet a corner. Here it does intersect and overlap, but there's no point there that it's hitting. So when you try to use this option, it will give you an error message and it can't do this. But if instead you right click on that end and you extend, trim, and add point, so it just broke the pattern edge into two parts. There's a point under there and it hits that point. I'm going to select this, extend, trim, and add point. So it just broke the pattern. Now this function will work. So there are a couple ways that you can fix your armhole aside from just moving points around in the 2D window. So I'm on the Edit Curve Point tool, and when I did that action called Retract, it added a very large amount of curve points that is more than I need. If you use the Edit Curve Point tool, you can right-click on a segment area. You're not clicking on a point to get this option, but right-click on the segment, and you'll find Optimize All Curve Points. That is going to simplify the amount of curve points on there, but keep the shape. It also applies it to every single pattern at once when you do this. So even though you may do this on the back neckline, every area that can be simplified will be. Now it's time to draft our sleeve. To draft my sleeve, I need the following 3 measurements in mind before I start drafting. The first is my total sleeve length, my bicep circumference, and my cap height. To figure out what these measurements are, I'm going to turn Show Avatar Measurements back on, select Edit Measurement, and then select that line around the bicep. And it's going to show me that her bicep is just over 12 inches. I'm going to make the bicep of the sleeve a bit bigger than 12 inches, but I know I should not be any less than that for sure. The next measurement that I'm going to get is the sleeve length. You can click on this segment and sleeve length is marked. It kind of wraps around the elbow and down to the back of the wrist. You can draw your own straight line measurement with the basic tape measurement. Here's 23 inches. Here's 21.5. You can determine and adjust your sleeve length very easily after it's created, so I'm not too worried about the sleeve length in general. And then the next measurement I'm going to get is the cap height. To get the sleeve cap height, you can measure your armhole circumference and divide that into 3 and start with 1/3 of that measurement as your sleeve cap height. That's a decent formula that I have used and works fine, but I'm going to show you another option that I've used as well. I'm going to select the back shoulder and the front shoulder simultaneously. Then if you right click on the shoulder, you'll find Matchup. Start is where the neckline is, center is the middle of the segments, and then end will be towards my armhole opening. So if I select that, if there's any difference, it's going to show here and not here. They are supposed to be the same length, but right after this, I can true up the neckline. I'm going to grab the internal polygon tool and draw a line from here to here. I'm going to measure the distance from that shoulder point to this line and use this to start my sleeve cap height. So this is 4.761. I'm going to remember that measurement, call it 4 3/4, and then I can delete these markings that I just put down. To rotate the back piece to its rightful position where it was before, I'm going to select Match Up with the side seams of the bodice, choose Match Up to End, and it'll flip that back down. Then I can spread this back out. So now that I have these 3 measurements, I have my bicep width I want to start with, I have a cap height, and I have a sleeve length. My fitted bicep measured 12 inches, but I'm going to start with 15 so I have some ease around my arm. I'm going to get the rectangle tool, left click once in the 2D window with it, and for the width, I'm actually going to work on the half with the bicep. So even though I decided on 15 inches, I'm going to cut this in half and type in 7.5. The height, I can do the total sleeve length of 22 and then hit OK. So I measured 4 3/4 for a cap height. I'm going to round that up to just 5 and make it a little bit taller. From the top edge, I'm going to choose Offset as internal line and here type in my 5-inch measurement and hit OK. Then using Add Point Split Line, I am going to square off a little 1/2 inch marking from this line over here, over from this corner. So when I create my sleeve cap shape, a little portion at the top stays flat. So 1/2 inch is good there. Then I'll grab internal polygon and draw a line straight across here. Using edit pattern, I'm going to just cut that off and then delete this pattern piece. Now I'm going to grab add point split line and evenly divide this segment into 3 segments. Hover right click and choose uniform split to evenly divide this one segment into 3 segments. Hit OK to complete that. Then I'm going to use edit pattern and create a perpendicular line off of this point downward and off of this point upward. Here I can right click and choose add perpendicular internal line local, change the length to 1/2 inch and hit OK. Now I'm going to do the same thing at this point, add perpendicular line local, 1/2 inch finished length, but select both. So I generate an internal line above that area as well, and then hit OK. Now I'm going to get internal polygon / line and basically connect the dots. I'll start at this top area, click on the top of this internal line that's poking out, dip down to this internal line poking in, and then finish at the corner by double clicking or clicking once and then hitting enter. Now that that line exists, I can grab the edit pattern tool, hold shift, select all of these segments, right click, and then choose replace as pattern outline. That's going to swap out what's currently the pattern outline with that internal line I just drew, and then I can continue with my shape. Then I'm going to use the edit curve point tool to go round out all of these areas. This area in the middle doesn't really have to get reshaped at all. And now I'm going to remove all of these markings. First, I'm going to select my transform pattern tool, right click, and delete the reference line. Then I'm going to lock all my pattern outlines so I can get the trace tool and select this area and then hit delete for all those parts. Then unlock all the pattern outlines. So before I start unfolding this or doing more, I'm going to remeasure my armhole circumference. So this is 19.6. So if I measure this top segment, I'm at 9.6. That's very, very close for me. I am going to not adjust this more. If you need to keep on adjusting, you can do a combination of widening the bicep and increasing the cap height in different ways, trying to keep the same relative shape but expanding the size of it a little bit to hit your target measurement. I'm really close, so I'm going to do that after I unfold it because I'm going to do a little bit of adjustment for my back sleeve cap area. Before I do that, I'm going to reduce my sleeve opening so I can grab this area, right click, and reduce this 2 inches. And I'm going to now take this bicep marking and just move it down 1 inch and hit OK. I'm going to clip this. And now I'm going to unfold my shape. You simply right click on this segment that feels like the center, choose unfold. You don't want the unfold with symmetry version, just regular unfold. And then remeasure my cap height. So now I have 19.315. I want this to measure in total 19.642. So I'm 0.3 away from this roughly. The next thing I'm going to do is to make an adjustment to the back sleeve area. So this is a little bit wider and the scoop back here feels a little bit deeper. I like to do this with the internal polygon / line. I can draw my shape beforehand and then make the final edit in one action. So I'm going to start at this point and really slowly and gradually add a little bit of width to the top rounded area of my sleeve cap. I'm going to end this at this point, and then I'm going to select these segments and replace the pattern outline. Now I'm going to remeasure this. I have 19.416, so now I'm 0.4 away from the measurement that I need. I'm going to try and achieve that by just widening my bicep a tiny little bit. I'm going to hold the D key down as I move this, and then I can hold Shift or Control, right click, and I'm just going to add 0.125. Then I'm going to go over here and also add 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. And now I'm going to remeasure my sleeve cap and see where I am. 9.66, so now I'm 0.2 away. I'm going to raise my sleeve cap again a super tiny bit. .642. That's really good. It's good that the sleeve has a tiny bit of ease. This is a sloper, so it's okay if it doesn't have too much. But now all of those leftover marking, that's a reference line. I am going to right click on my pattern piece and choose delete reference line. Great. Now I'm going to duplicate this sleeve, so I have 2 sleeves. Using transform pattern, right click on your sleeve and choose symmetric pattern with sewing. Place that down on the opposite side. Okay, I can see both my sleeves here. I am still on the tape measure tool, so I'm going to go back to selection. And I can turn the measurements off at this point. Okay, before I sew this in, I want some sleeve notches so I know what's the front and what's the back. I'm going to place a notch that actually matches this distance. So here's 3.654. So I'm going to select these 2 segments, and then when I use the notch tool, it will disregard and be able to bypass this point. And I can type in the same measurement, 3.654. Oh, I need that in the blue line, 3.654. Okay, so that's going right here, this blue section. Okay. I can convert this point to curve point. It's going to be fine. Then I'll get my notch tool and hover, right click, and I'm going to choose 3 inches as well. 3-inch marking there. I'm going to select these 2 segments, get the notch tool, right click, put a 3-inch marking there. Then I'm going to put another 3.5-inch marking, so I have 2 notches on the back. So here, and then here as well. If I type in 3.5, I'll have a 1/2-inch marking away there. All right, now I can arrange this and sew this on. I will turn my arrangement points on, move around so I can select this sleeve, place this down on my arm arrangement point. I can turn my arrangement points off. And then this is how I'm going to sew the sleeve together. Using the free sewing tool, I'm going to follow first my front and back notch. So attach this front lower part, then I'll get the back part to the second notch, back part to the second notch. Then I'm going to select the entire sleeve cap that's left. Hold Shift and attach this from there to the shoulder And then move to the back shoulder corner, click to start, and slide down to the notch, click to end. I'm not going to go past the notch. And then all of that small amount of ease is just going to get evenly distributed between the front and the back. Then I can close my sleeve inseam and simulate. And now I have a bodice and a sleeve. While her arms are out, you're going to see a little bit of pulling here, but once she relaxes her arms, she's also in a woven. But this is a really good place to start if you really need a basic bodice for a size that you don't have.